What is up, everybody? Welcome into this brand new edition of the Pack a Day podcast here on YouTube. I hope you are doing well. I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to join me. My name is Andy Herman. You can always follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. I'm a writer and editor for Packer Report. I'm also the owner and founder of the Pack a Day podcast, but enough about me. We have a ton to get into today, and that is because the Packers held their press conferences yesterday. Matt LaFleur, Brian Gutekunst, Nathaniel Hackett, the entire, obviously introducing Joe Barry. Everyone talked. Maurice Drayton talked on Tuesday. So a lot of news, notes, and rumblings that came out of those specific press conferences. My main topic I want to get to is Preston Smith, which I'll get to in just a little bit. But I want to start off by going over Joe Barry's press conference. I didn't think there was a ton that was noteworthy in Matt LaFleur's. So let's start with Joe Barry's. And this was, of course, our first introduction to Joe Barry as a defensive coordinator of the Green Bay Packers. And as far as first impressions go, I thought he did a really nice job. Was definitely a little bit over anxious, talked a lot, had some long-winded answers, used the word phenomenal a lot, but you could tell that he was geeked up to be in Green Bay, that he really felt like this was a really strong foundation and that this is exactly where he wanted to be. And this did not seem like lip service at all. You could tell how appreciative of, that he was of being in an organization like the Green Bay Packers. And, some of the noteworthy takeaways from Joe Barry, first of all, they're going to keep a 3-4 base defense. And as I asked the question to Matt LaFleur, and as Joe Barry had stated, you're only playing about 10 to 15% in your base defense anyway. So it mostly doesn't matter, if it's a 4-3 or a 3-4, it's mostly irrelevant in today's day and age. But he did mention that they're going to stay in a 3-4 base defense. But I thought he, really wrapped up his interview at the end perfectly in saying, listen, it doesn't matter if you're in a 3-4, a 4-3, a Tampa 2, what scheme you're doing. At the end of the day, it comes down to getting off blocks, tackling, and taking away the football. And he was very adamant that that's what his defense is going to do. And again, that's what you want your defensive coordinator to say, right? He's not exactly splitting the atom here, but I thought that was the right track to be on in your opening press conference. And again, I think, he was very articulate. He was very detailed. You could tell he has a lot of experience, and you can see again why Matt LaFleur, would have been interested in him as a defensive coordinator. It wasn't tough to get that at all. So you could tell that both he and Matt LaFleur mentioned that there's going to be some new wrinkles, which of course, and this is kind of, a Brandon Staley style defense. There's been a lot of talk of, wanting to run a Vic Fangio style. Well, Joe Barry went out of his way to basically say, listen, this isn't exactly a Vic Fangio. This is a very Brandon Staley defense. This is a unique defense that Brandon Staley put together. And, this is a version of that Joe Barry's going to be running. And again, of all the things that were said negatively about Joe Barry, one of the things that it's hard not to like is he has a PhD in the Tony Dungy Tampa 2 system, right? He worked with Wade Phillips and his 3-4 aggressive defense. And then he works with Brandon Staley, which comes from that Vic Fangio style tree. And then again, in-house, you've got Jerry Gray, who ran that Mike Zimmer defense. And of course, everyone in Green Bay is going to be familiar with that Mike Pettin style defense. So you really have this amalgamation of all of these really great defensive minds. And Joe Barry has a lot of that. So he has the right mindset to put together a fantastic scheme, a fantastic playbook, call the right plays. Now the proof will be in the pudding to see if he can put his players in a position to succeed, if they can execute the defense, and ultimately if they can be a good defense in 2021 and beyond. That's where, ultimately everything will be decided. But I thought as, again, first impressions go and for a first, just introduction to Green Bay, I thought it was really impressive, and I'm excited to see what he's going to be able to continue to do moving forward. That brings me to Nathaniel Hackett's press conference. So first of all, I thought that, kind of a big takeaway here was he was asked at the end about Devin Funchess, of whether Devin Funchess will be kind of a part of that game plan. And he kind of had like a sly smile, and it was like I didn't know, it was almost like he didn't want to answer the question. Then he's like, we'll find out. It was like his quote, we'll find out. Needless to say, it wasn't a strong indicator for Devin Funchess that he's going to be on this team and a part of this offense in 2021. I'm not saying and, reading too much into it and saying that's it, he's gone, he's cut, whatever. But it definitely, if I had to lean one way or the other based off of that comment of whether Devin Funchess is going to have a role in Green Bay, I would absolutely be leaning no after that answer. But read into it what you will. I don't want to read into it too much, but I thought that was an interesting comment. And then I asked him as well about Mercedes Lewis, and if in fact he's not back in free agency, is there a player on the roster that can do what Mercedes Lewis does? And he said plainly, he doesn't think there's anyone, not just on the Packers, but anyone who can do what Mercedes Lewis does on the field. And this was just another real vote of confidence. We've seen it from Aaron Rodgers. We've seen it from Matt LaFleur. We've seen it now from Nathaniel Hackett. There is a lot of faith and a lot of trust and a lot of respect for Mercedes Lewis in that locker room. I would be beyond shocked if they did not bring him back in some capacity. He's basically played on the same contract for the past few seasons, so it seems like, they'd be able to just kind of work out the same thing. I think of all the, Green Bay free agents, Kevin King, Corey Linsley, Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams, etc., the unrestricted free agents, I think Mercedes Lewis is by far the most likely to be back, and it wouldn't surprise me if that was the next contract to get done. But just another real vote of confidence, again, this time from Nathaniel Hackett. And then Maurice Drayton, I thought the biggest takeaway here from Maurice Drayton was that he clearly and blatantly said J.K. Scott and Hunter Bradley, their, quote, backs are against the wall. So no bones about it. And that this should be the case, right? Hunter Bradley, I thought Matt Schneidman put this very well in his article that he wrote the other day. If you notice the long snapper's not doing his job. And we have noticed the long snapper far too often over the course of the last couple seasons. So that is a very bad sign for Hunter Bradley. And when your special teams coach in his first press conference puts you on blast and said your back's against the wall to everyone in the world, that should be a heavy indicator that you would better get some consistency. And consistency was really what he pointed to for both J.K. Scott and Hunter Bradley. Neither player has played well, at least up to their standards. And to the extent that I'd be surprised in a way if either were back, once 53, the 53-man roster is set and cutdowns are done. I think there's a really strong chance that both of those players are gone. If you do make that move, you want to make it sooner rather than later. So you have a full training camp for Mason Crosby to get used to a new a new holder and a new long snapper. But I mean, man, those are going to be some very interesting decisions. And needless to say, Hunter Bradley and J.K. Scott better be up to par, or again, the backs against the wall is not a good sign. And that brings us to Brian Gutekunst. So Brian Gutekunst did an initial press conference with all the media, and then apparently did like a smaller session with some of the main beat writers. I'm sure probably Demovsky, Wilde, the Ryan Woods, the Tom Silversteins, that group, I'm sure, Bill Huber, etc. So I'm sure that's the group. I was not invited. Thanks a lot, Green Bay Packers. But, so they did a separate session. So the first session, I didn't think there was too many big takeaways. I did notice, it was at least worth noting, I should say, that he specifically called out 3 special teams players, Ty Summers, Oren Burks, and Will Redmond, calling them the core of the special teams. So that is a really good sign for those players. So I know, first of all, Ty Summers, I think everyone expected to be back just based on the depth of inside linebacker. Right now he's the number 3 guy, probably behind Kamal Martin and obviously Chris Barnes. And so, I mean, his spot was pretty solidified, but Oren Burks, certainly not. And I'm not saying that he just automatically gets on the team because he was a core special teams player a season ago, but that certainly helps his case, and certainly helps his case to stay on the roster through this initial portion of the season where he does have over $1 million set to make this season. They could move on from him, but that's a good sign for Oren Burks that he, that Brian Gutekunst called him a core special teamer. And then Will Redmond's a restricted free agent. So another player that I think could get tendered. That'll be a really interesting contract, because I don't think you want to pay Will Redmond $2 million, certainly not in this economy. So how they figure out getting him back will be interesting. But certainly, mentioning Will Redmond, Oren Burks, and Ty Summers was certainly good for them, any way that you want to look at it. And then I asked him, I basically said, with the cap situation the way that it is it realistic that if there was a player that you wanted to go get a high-end player, that you would have the capability of going and getting that player, or is that not realistic in the current state of the salary cap? And he said he thought that they would be able to make that type of move if they thought it was the right move for the Green Bay Packers. And, didn't make any qualms about it. It was very matter of fact that, yes, they can make that move if they want to make that move. He did add, however, that they can't do a lot. So this is telling, right? Yes, they can probably go out and get a high-end player, but we all knew this wasn't going to be a 2019 offseason where they get Preston, Za'Darius, and Adrian Amos and Billy Turner, right? This is never going to be the case for this season. This is much more maybe they can get one big name or a couple smaller names like they did last season with Kirksey, Wagner, and Funchess. I still kind of believe it's going to be maybe that latter, but it is at least noteworthy that, Brian Gutekunst did say that he has the ability to make that move if he wants to do it. So I think that was kind of the big takeaway from Brian Gutekunst's press conference. And then later it came out, as again, I wasn't part of that initial, panel with Brian Gutekunst and with the local media. Later it came out, via Matt Schneidman and Bill Huber and, a couple other people who were in there, that in his press conference later, he was asked about Preston Smith. And his quote was, "Preston has played a lot of really good football for us, and certainly we'd like to have him back next year. He's under contract, so certainly we expect him to be back." So let me start with this. That in no way, shape, or form guarantees that Preston Smith will be back. We have heard general managers before say, yes, this player will be back, and then they, of course, are not back. They're cut, they're released, they're traded. That this could all be something that tries to help Preston Smith's trade value if they think that they might be able to move him around the league. This could be a variety of different things, right? He's certainly not going to come out and say, no, we're expecting to cut Preston Smith, or any of that, anything like that. So if this is a press conference that is, going to be out to the media, and, he has to watch what he says. So I'm not super surprised here, but there's other ways that you can dodge this question, other than saying we expect him to be back. I mean, when you quote to say we expect him to be back, you're almost going out of your way, right? Because if you're thinking that you're going to release him, why would you say we expect him to be back? Like, you could say a million different things there of like, we're still evaluating everything this offseason. We're not ready to say any player is going to be back. Like, we've heard a variety of different GMs speak for these type of situations in the past. And I thought Peter Bukowski pointed out very similarly that when he was asked about Jimmy Graham in a very similar way after his first year in his contract, when Green Bay had an opportunity to get out, very similarly to Preston Smith, he said almost the same quote verbatim, that they expected Jimmy Graham to be back the next season. And of course he was. He was kept back on that second season, then they released him on the third year of his deal. So right now I have to say that I'm taking Brian Gutekunst at his word a little bit and saying that it seems more likely than not that Preston Smith will be back. And the first doubt in my mind was certainly when they released Christian Kirksey and Rick Wagner, and Preston Smith wasn't a part of that. If you were going to release Preston Smith, it just makes sense that you're probably doing it at that exact same time, unless you wanted to see what the cap was going to be, or unless you thought he had trade value, which at his contract, I do not think he has trade value. So to me, it seems like this is a player they plan to have on the team. I will also note that this does not mean that there won't be a restructure with Preston Smith. And I said all along, I believe that Preston Smith will be released unless there's a restructure. If there's a restructure, depending on how far it goes down, that certainly can make a lot more sense. But either way, this is a little bit surprising to me, because if Green Bay wants to get under the cap, Preston Smith is easily the number one way to help do that by cutting $8 million immediately. But as I talked about in the edge rusher position and recently wrote about for Packer Report, this is not just saving $8 million this year. If you release him, you save the $8 million, this year, but you save $12 million overall. And that is a huge amount. It's really akin to, if you're keeping Preston Smith this year, it'd be like signing him to a 1-year, $12 million deal. Now, not all of that $12 million goes towards the cap this year. Some of it would go towards next year. But in the end, for this year and next year, of what you'd pay for Preston Smith, you'd pay $12 million for Preston Smith for this one season of play. And that is a lot of money for a player that regressed incredibly from 2019 into 2020. For both Pro Football Focus and he was the Packers' second biggest regression behind Zadarius Smith, who Zadarius still played well, just not up to his superhuman level in 2019. Preston did not. He was graded far below average for myself and for Pro Football Focus. So this was a major decline for Preston Smith this past season. And I want to be clear here. My grades in no way, shape, or form are the be-all, end-all for anything, but they've been fairly predictive of what's going to happen with bad players. I've had 27 players that have graded negative 4.0 or worse from 2017 to 2019. And if you look at that, 16 of those 27 were gone the next season, were either released, traded, etc. They were gone the next season. And only 3 of the 27 actually bounced back and graded in the positive the next season. One of those was Kyler Fackrell, who definitely made a jump from 2017 to 2018. Brian Bulaga had a down year in 2017, was banged up a little bit, did not play up to his normal standard. Everyone knew that that was probably an off year. He bounced back in 2018 and was back to his normal self. And then the other one was Josh Jackson, who struggled mightily in 2018. He played better and graded in a slight positive in 2019, but mostly because they didn't play him. He had like 100 snaps in 2019 after like 700 in 2018 100 in 2019 after like 700 in 2018. So they basically just didn't play him. In his small amount of snaps that he got, mostly in garbage time, he graded okay and as a slight above average. So that one doesn't even count. So it's like 2 out of 27 players really had bounce backs and graded well. And again, the majority of those players were gone the very next season. So again, my grades are not the be all end all, but these are the names that are on that list. Lance Kendricks, Kyle Murphy, Justin McCray 2 times, Jason Spriggs 2 times, Bulaga, as I mentioned, Quentin Dial, Ahmad Brooks, Kyler Fackrell, Josh Hawkins, Geronimo Allison, Billy Turner, Jimmy Graham twice, Alex Light, Blake Martinez, Clinton Dix twice, Kentrell Bryce twice, Josh Jones, Byron Bell, Nick Perry, Reggie Gilbert, Clay Matthews in his last season when he really struggled, and then Josh Jackson. That is the list of players who have graded negative 4.0 or worse. That is a bad list of players. That is not a list that you want to be on. And 2 players this past season were added to that list, Preston Smith and Kevin King. Unlikely that Kevin King's back. I thought it extremely unlikely that Preston Smith was back either. And now it sounds like he will be. So this isn't to say that Brian Gutekunst isn't smarter than me, because he absolutely is. But GMs make mistakes too. If I'm playing devil's advocate, I understand that you need 3 pass rushers, and Preston Smith, Rashawn Gary, Zadarius Smith can form a very good trio if everyone's playing well. That's still a major if. I also realized that he could return to form. 2020 was a down year, but 2019 was, really good. And, he's shown the ability to play well in the past, and he could easily return to form with more fans in the stands. Maybe he was banged up a season ago. We don't know what the cause for the decline is, and maybe Green Bay does, and they feel very comfortable that he's going to play much better in 2021. I'm skeptical, but maybe that's the case. And then the other thing he is only 28 years old. Like, it kind of feels like he's like 31, 32. He's been in the league a while, but he's only 28 years old. He's not like past his prime or anything like that. It's not like Jimmy Graham, who is like 34, 35. Preston is only 28, but I have major concerns about Green Bay. I mean, that's basically one of their major free agent signings this year. We've talked about Green Bay not being able to do a lot. Well, keeping Preston Smith on his contract this season is Green Bay's big free agent signing. That's what they're doing if they keep him at his current contract. And there's a lot of offseason to go. And again, there could be a restructure. He could still be traded. He could still be cut. We'll see. But if we're taking Brian Gutekunst at his word, and if they expect him to be on the roster, that's really one of their big moves for the offseason. And that gives me a lot of concern. And I've not been very skeptical or critical of many of the moves that Brian Gutekunst has made. I think he's done a really nice job overall. My biggest thing that I questioned was not releasing Jimmy Graham after that first season when he played like crap, and they had an opportunity to get out and they brought him back and he played like crap again. To me, this is very similar. Preston Smith did not play well a season ago. They have an opportunity to get out at a time where they need money to be able to make improvements to this team. They're not. If he bounces back, great. And I would love to be proven wrong here. No doubt about it. I hope Preston Smith goes on to have 20 sacks as a Green Bay Packer this season. That'd be awesome. But I have serious reservations that can take place. And this is probably the second most critical thing that I feel like I've been of Brian Gutekunst, if he in fact does keep Preston Smith at his current contract. That's going to do it for me. Thank you so much for tuning in. I always appreciate it. I'll be right back here tomorrow for an all-new edition of the Pack a Day podcast on YouTube. Make sure to check out Dusty, Steve, and Sarah wherever you get your favorite audio podcasts. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.